Lamborghini fans, and welcome to another episode of the Engineering Sarcasm Show, fronted by yours truly, everyone's favourite 5-year-old. That would be myself. In today's episode, a new entrant onto the show. We have these, which are EXAR wheels. Now, you might not have heard of EXAR, but you've probably heard of the company Magene. And Magene make power meters, and most recently they made a radar to compete with the Garmin. Well, this is their first foray into wheels, and I've got some of these, I've had these for quite a while, to test. And today, I'm going to explain to you what's good and what's not good about these. So, what do we got? Well, we've got two 45mm deep rims. They are actually asymmetrical. Well, the rear one is asymmetrical. It's very, very subtle, and I'd probably be struggling to show you by camera, but it is asymmetrical. So the difference is, I think, mainly more for stiffness rather than aerodynamics, because it's limited to the rear. The front is symmetrical. In terms of actual construction, obviously carbon fibre rim, exposed nipple, steel spoke, straight into the hub. On this side it's straight. On the drive side you've got some crossover. On the front you've got, again, it's a similar kind of construction. You've got straight pull and a fairly slender front hub, but I guess it doesn't need to be because it's not a disc wheel, this one. This is the front wheel rim. It's about 27mm. I think it was quoted at 28. It's actually a bit narrower towards the top, but it also depends on where you put the dimples. One side of the wheel is 20mm. This is the back wheel, and that's 26mm, there or thereabouts, on the outside. And the inside of this one is measuring up at 19.3, probably about 19mm, something like that. Back wheel weighs in at 757, minus any skewers. The front wheel weighs in at 610. So you're looking at around about 1300 for the set. One absolutely outstanding feature on this wheel set is this brake track. It is something else. When you press the brakes, even when it's wet, it is super responsive. I don't use those words to be sarcastic. I mean, literally, you press your fingers on the brakes on a rim brake. Normally, you're just a passenger, but on this, the bite is there, especially when it's wet. These are the nipples. They are probably about 5 or 6mm on show. And then you've got these spokes, which I think are pillar wing spokes. And then they come through to this hub, and we'll take one of these apart now. Now, those of you who get off on Freehub noise, they're quite quiet, really. Now, in terms of the hub, where you see the marks that the cassettes cut in, it's not really too indifferent to anything else. And you can also see inside where the cassette screw or the locking ring has worn a bit of the aluminium body away. Part, we need to pull that off. Okay, I'd frigged this. I got that semi off anyway because it was a bit easier to do. Then once that's off, you can just pull on the free hub. Now this has got a massive bearing in there, which is quite unusual. So second in the dimension series, and the spacer is also usually just a weedy affair, but this one is a chunky little thing. Then inside, okay, I've cleaned it, but there's certain features on here that are really quite good. I mean, the width of the pulls on there, they're massive, and also the quality of the seal is huge. It's a lot better than most free hubs that you see. You only know wear that seal out when you don't pedal, because that's when you've got a speed mismatch between the two sides. When you're pedaling, it's all locked up, but that's quite well designed. There's a little plastic thing over there to stop the pulls from falling out, and then inside you've got another bearing. Now that looks like an oddball size. Yeah, it's a 15267. So Yeah, marks down for that. But for that, that's certainly a positive point. If you are one of the regular viewers of the channel, you will know about the extensive use of numerical modelling that I do on here. Now that would not be possible without Skillshare, who are kindly sponsoring today's video. Now Skillshare is just a bit more than a learning platform. It allows you to interact, grow and succeed in tasks that you may have otherwise found somewhat challenging. In my case, I joined Skillshare for two primary reasons. The first was to improve my German, and the second, which is a lot more relevant and you've just seen, was to improve my Excel visualization skills. So it appeals to a wider range of people, such as those viewing the channel. Now, the course that I would recommend is this one, which is called Microsoft Excel Essentials Level 3 VBA Programming by Alan Jarvis. Now I found this course to be quite engaging and pitched at just the right level. He covers everything like visualization strategies for wider audiences, some of the key coding, and also fine levels of customization that give you the tools to adapt what you've learned to your particular situation. If you are interested in becoming a member of Skillshare, the first 1,000 people to use the link in the description box will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Right, here we go again. It is that time of the show to check if all of our pens are working. We don't have foofy, so we don't need to worry about that. Pen is working. The Magene EXAR, unexpectedly good. By Hambini, aged 5. Remember to check out the website and Patreon. And also me on Instagram. Right, who are Magene? Well, they were founded in 2015 and they've got a fairly varied portfolio, but the things they're probably most well known for is the turbos, like this one, which is the T300. It looks a lot like a Tax Neo and a few of the others. And also the power meter, which is shown here. Again, that's been on Shane Miller and DC Rainmaker's channels a few times. EXAR is a sub-brand of Magene, so they're based in China. They've got quite a lot of employees. I think it was 600 or so when I had a look on their website. And other than the hardware, they've also got some software in the sense of looks to be a competitor to Zwift called OneLap. Right, the RB45 Pro, it is a 45mm deep wheel set, so this is the one that was sent to me, and these are my measurements, not the official ones. I measured the outside at 27mm and the rear at 26mm, so the front is slightly wider than the back, and the rear is also asymmetric. Rim brake, I measured 1,367 grams and they quoted 1,330. That 1,330 doesn't include the rim tape, but mine does, so it's probably about bang on, and there's plus or minus a few percent in there, maybe 3 or 4%, so I think their quoted weight and their measured weight is pretty accurate. 19mm internal width. They've got pillar wing spokes. The bearings are very, very low noise, and that's a combination of the bearing and the fit, which we'll come on to. And when you buy it, you will get skewers, spare rim tape, valves, all that kind of good stuff. Right, this is probably one of the features of the wheel set that is unusual to others. The asymmetric rear wheel. So it's got this offset from the center line, so the spokes come in at an angle. That's beneficial from a stiffness point of view because you can't generate any lateral stiffness on a perfectly vertical spoke. You're reliant on the other side to take up the compressive and tensile forces. If you make that angle slightly wider, then it structurally makes it better. So I think that's why it's done. And there's also a comment on their website for lateral stiffness around this asymmetric rim profile. As far as aerodynamics goes, I don't really think it makes that much difference. The main reason is the air, by the time it's got to the back wheel, has been already gone through the food blender that is your front wheel, your legs, and the crank. Build quality. Now you might argue, well, this is a Hambini special. Well, I can only review what I got, and really these are pretty run-of-the-mill. If you got a wheel that was way out from this, you'd be sending it back. So 0.5 mm radial and lateral run out. Spoke flats roll in line, again you'd expect that. Very even tension across it. Now I measured with a tension meter rather than with one of these Parktool handheld things. So the readings I will put on the website, but you really want to look at the deviation away from average more than anything else. Rim manufacturer, again I will put some pictures on the website. They don't really show up so well on YouTube sometimes. And as far as me riding the wheels goes, I've ridden through some ridiculously deep puddles. I had to get somewhere. Basically, it was to get to the hairdresser for what. That was the only thing that was 6 inches deep, I can tell you. Right, we'll move on. Jesus. This is a strong point of the Magene wheelset, and that is the quality of the hub. The hubs that you can get are generally, they come from Taiwan or China, and the supplier can supply in various grades. This looks like a very highly spec'd hub because the fits in there are akin to a ground tolerance. I don't think that's Almini special. I think they're genuinely made to that because there's some telltale giveaways in the sense that some of the way that it locates, which makes me think that's what they've done. They've spec'd a very high hub. The benefit of N5, which is a ground tolerance, normally you would have to grind it to that tolerance rather than a lathe gets you to that tolerance. I think a lathe has made it, but typically if you use IT standards, you would specify that as a ground finish. I mean, I've really put okay there, but it should be exceptional. Very good. And that gives you very low vibration, which is shown here, and that quality of the hub really affects this. I mean, the vibration on it is low. That's the lowest I've seen to date, and I don't think you'd get much lower than that going forward. Even after 1000 Ks, absolutely nothing. So very big tick in the box there for that hub. Now it's difficult for Magene or EXAR to kind of describe that to the wider world because it's not something you can see. It's not like a saucy rim profile that goes around and you can see it. You just can't. Then we come on to the residual imbalance. This is a chart showing the angle and the amount of imbalance. The angle is where it is relative to the wheel tyre valve hole. So 0 is where the valve hole is. You can see the angle of the wind space is like 250 degrees, the Far Sports is at 10, and the XR's at 20. The limit value on here is 610, so it's just past this outer line. So that's just past there. If you go past there, then that wheel is out of spec by IT standards, or ISO standards, sorry. That wheel, the XR wheel, the wind space wheel, and the Far Sports wheel are all comfortably under that. The Far Sports wheel historically is low, and many Far Sports wheels that I've tested, and it's a popular brand, they've been low. So that's good. Again, the XR is no problem, and neither is the wind space. It may look like the wind space is bad, but really there's 3 good wheels there. The stability. Now, normal stability is, people talk about crosswind stability. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you use Dmitriev methods, you can give yourself an exacting value. So normally we'd say instability occurs where the stability criterion exceeds 1. So this is 1, and that's the line. So any point above that, the wheel set becomes unstable. So the biggest influence on instability is how deep the wheel is. So this grey line here, which is an 80mm wheel, you lose stability here. So you're about 10. Whereas as the wheel gets slightly less deep, so shallower, you're starting to lose it around here. Which is, and bear in mind, it's a log scale, so that'll be 80, 90. If you go to a very shallow wheel, so this orange line, which is a 35mm wheel, you're at like 120. Sorry, maybe 200, 300. So it's it's a factor better. The EXAR wheel is this blue line here. Oh god, that one there. And its straight line performance is affected by it being shallow, but as you go further along, its operating window of instability is much more favourable than a bigger wheel. So you lose something and you gain something. It's not, I wouldn't say it's exceptional, I wouldn't say it's disastrous, it's sort of what you would expect for a 45mm wheel. And this sort of description here, so with the arrows, that shows basically a wind tunnel. So if you're in a wind tunnel, you would be getting this kind of figure here. If you're outside in the real world, probably Dmitriev number 80, something like that. This isn't quite a proper blown Dmitriev number, but it's with a bit of a few tweaks. Right, the aerodynamic summary. Nominally, at 188 watts, 30 kilometers per hour is how much power you would expend, and it's average for this wheel depth and width. The formula to work that out, so if you do the correlations, and they're available on my website, if you do that at 30 k's, you would plug that formula in and you get 188.15, something like that. So 188 watts measured versus a predicted 188 watts, it's bang on average. Right, the tidbits, the good. The hub is extremely well engineered and made. I think that EXAR have probably gone to a hub manufacturer and asked for a very high specification of what they can offer. No real doubt in my mind in that regard. And following on from that, the bearing fit especially is so good that you get a lot less noise than in typical hubs I've seen. Mechanical wind-up is low. So the mechanical wind-up is, I guess it's a term that's sometimes difficult to describe, but when you are applying load, you get clearances and things that take up and then you feel the power exerted. For example, if you were to put power on the crank, there's a small amount of clearance in the chain before it takes up the slack and then you go. In this wheel set, when you go from left to right, you know, when you're out of the pedals, you know, chugging up a hill or whatever, sometimes you feel flex, but you don't in the Magene wheel set, and I think that's mainly because the hubs are well engineered and the bearing clearance in there is small. In the wet, these wheels are excellent, especially for a rim. Those channels that are cut into the brake sidewalls really make a difference. I've seen that in some other wheels before, so the Far Sports wheels, again, the difference between having them and not having them in the wet is like night and day. The wheels aren't the lightest. There's some other brands which are lighter, but nonetheless, for acceleration, when you put your foot down, you're not accelerating a massive mass. So the acceleration or spin up speed, for want of trying to copy journalists, you know what they're like, is good. And that's mainly because it's a low inertia wheel set. $970, so sub 1,000. Okay, it's going to be location dependent, depending on how the taxman or whatever's feeling like stinging you if he wishes to. But again, for that price, I think you're getting a lot of wheel for your money. The bad bits, right? I don't know if this is really a bad thing, but the asymmetrical rear wheel doesn't seem to make a much difference in my opinion. By the time the air's got there, it's already disturbed anyway. In terms of lateral stiffness, between this and the carbon spoke symmetrical wheel, again, I don't think there's that much difference, but that's my opinion rather than having to measure it. If you are going to get these wheels, I would go for the slightly deeper profile, so the 58. I think you'll gain a lot more for losing less, and that's mainly because the thickness to chord ratio is more favourable. And this is more of a point statement. If you are using, I think the second generation of Shimano calipers, you're probably going to need slimline front brake pads. So grind them down a little bit because I couldn't get them past to get them to go down. So just bear that in mind. This chart is one that a lot of people have asked for, and it basically rates the wheel in terms of cost, and on here I put performance, but really it's performance and quality. So this is cost is a objective measure, so it is a fact basically, and the quality and performance is more of an opinion. So JRA, KPS and Ascent. So these are 3 wheel brands I would avoid. So the JRA is marginally better than the KPS and Ascent because they won't put you in hospital, but the Ascent costs more. So as you go in that way, you'd expect a better wheel, and you're not really getting one. So they're ones to avoid. So there's worse than it should be and better than it should be. So if you're on this side of that line, that's not where you want to be. On that side of the line is better. Then you've got the Aeolus by Bontrager and the Swiss Side 800. So they are expensive wheels, but you're getting quality that I think you're paying for. So, you know, can't really say much more than that. They are expensive. However, in terms of ultimate performance, I really rate the Windspace Hyper 50 for the 2020 model. I think that is one of the best wheels that you can get. So, especially for rim brake, 23mm, that's ideal. The Fastsports Von 2S also I rate probably in terms of performance as highly as the Windspace. The difference is you've got to pay a bit more to get it, so it does cost a little bit more, and in the wet the Fastsports is better because it has the groove track, whereas the Windspace doesn't. But for ultimate aerodynamic performance, and then we're talking like a watt or so, the Windspace is better. And then the Elite 40V. So I know Elite had some problems with, I think, with their disc-based hubs, which I think they fixed, but it was down to excessively high tension on the hubs and a bearing fit that caused problems. But the 40V, I haven't had any issues with that, and that's a very light wheel, so it accelerates quickly. It costs a bit less, and again, I'd rate that wheel highly. It's well above the line of shame, let's call it. The Hyper 65 by Windspace, this is actually a faster wheel than the 50, but you're probably wondering why I've put it down a bit over the 50, and that's mainly because the 50 will get you 95%, 99% of the aerodynamics without having the crosswind instability of the 65. So it's a law of physics, and for me, if you're riding in windy conditions, which is basically all the time in Northern Europe, the 50 is a better wheel for those conditions. But if you're riding in still weather, 65 you'd probably rate up here. So yeah, there you go. The XR RB45 is, you know, in that same ballpark, so it's a lot of wheel for your money. It's well above average, and I have really no hesitation recommending it. So all of those, and this is kind of the way the world is going. So all of these brands that you previously, you know, hadn't heard of or weren't familiar with, they've all started to make fairly high quality products, and they're caning the, you know, the established brands over here and over here, which I haven't put down yet, with quality products that don't cost that much. So, you know, again, I think that's probably, times are changing, and this is it. Right, questions and comments. Please remember to like and subscribe. It really does help me and helps the channel. Follow me on Instagram, HambiniEng on Instagram. I've also got a Patreon site, so if you want exclusive content, and mainly content that's released much earlier than it is on YouTube, then check me out on there. And that brings us to the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, remember to smash that like button, and if you didn't, go screw yourself. And as always, keep banging your hairdresser.